Hi guys, welcome to your first asynchronous assignment for Monday. So on Mondays, we're going to be doing a cool thing, which is called a read aloud. And it's where I'm going to read a book to you guys, and you guys are going to use your listening skills to complete an activity each Monday about this book. Um, I am going to have a copy of the book on the screen so that you can follow along with me if you would like to. I'm going to read for about 10 to 12 minutes each Monday. I'm going to read this book, and then you'll complete some sort of activity with this book. So the book we're going to read this month is called Michael Vey, The Prisoner of Cell 25. And I personally have never read this book before either. And I made a point to I was very tempted to go look through the book and kind of see what it was about. But I thought, no, I wanted to be able to experience it with you guys firsthand. So we're going to read this book together. And as I read aloud, you can follow along. All right. It's all I know about it is it's science fiction, and it's about this young kid who has electric powers. So I'm going to read the first few chapters to you guys, and then you're going to answer some questions. So part 1, chopsticks and spiders. Have you found the last two? The voice on the phone was angry and coarse, like the sound of car tires over broken glass. Not yet, the well-dressed man on the other end of the phone replied. Not yet, but we believe we're close, and they still don't know that we're hunting them. You believe we're close? There are 2 children among a billion. Finding them is like finding lost chopstick in China. Is that what you want me to tell the board? Remind the board that I've already found 15 of the 17 children. I've put out $1 million bounty on the last 2. We've got spiders crawling the web, and we have a whole team of investigators scanning global records for the whereabouts. It's just a matter of time before we find them, or they step into one of our traps. Time isn't on our side, the voice returned sharply. Those kids are already too old. You know how difficult they are to turn at this age. I know better than anyone, the well-dressed man said, tapping his ruby-capped pen on his desk. But I have my ways, and if they don't turn, there's always cell 25. There was a long pause, then the voice on the phone replied darkly, yes, there's always cell 25. So I'm going to pause for a minute. I really like how the writer is already getting me interested in this book. They're already creating a bunch of mystery of things that I have to figure out. I can tell they're looking for some lost children, and that they're going to turn these children. I wonder what that means, turn them. And if they can't turn them, there's always cell 25. I wonder what cell 25 is. And it sounds like it's a bad thing, but let's read more and find out. It kind of sounds like these people looking for these kids might not be good guys, but I don't know. The beginning. It's not like I was looking for trouble. I didn't have to. At my height, it just always found me. My name is Michael Vey, and the story I'm about to tell you is strange. Very strange. It's my story. If you passed me walking home from school, you probably wouldn't even notice me. That's because I'm just a kid like you. I go to school like you. I get bullied like you. Unlike you, I live in Idaho. Don't ask me what state Idaho is in. Newsflash, Idaho is a state. The fact that most people don't know where Idaho is exactly why my mother and I moved here, so people wouldn't find us. But that's part of my story. Besides, living in Idaho, I'm different from you in other ways. For one, I have Tourette's syndrome. You probably know less about Tourette's syndrome than you do Idaho. Usually when you see someone on TV pretending to have Tourette's syndrome, they're shouting swear words or barking like a dog. Most of us with Tourette's don't do that. I mostly just blink my eyes a lot. If I'm really anxious, I'll also clear my throat or make a gulping noise. Sometimes it hurts. Sometimes kids make fun of me. It's no picnic having Tourette's, but there are worse things that can happen to you, like having your dad die of a heart attack when you're 8. Believe me, that's much worse. I'm still not over that. Maybe I never will be. There's something else you don't know about me. It's my secret, something that scares people more than you would believe. That secret is the reason we moved to Idaho in the first place. But again, that's part of my story. So I might as well tell it to you. Okay, I'm going to pause again. I really like here how the writer is clearly writing as if they're a teenager. The kind of language they're using, the way that the main character is speaking, using phrases like newsflash and short, choppy sentences. I can really tell a lot about this kid's personality just based off of the way the writer is writing. Let's keep reading. The armpit. Mr. Dahlstrom's office is as good a place to begin as any, or as bad a place. Mr. Dahlstrom is the principal of Meridian High School, where I go to school. If you ask me, ninth grade is the armpit of life. And there I was in the very stinkiest part of that armpit, the principal's office. I was sitting in Mr. Dahlstrom's office, blinking like crazy. You could guess that I'm not fond of Mr. Dahlstrom, which would be stating the obvious, like saying breathing is important, or Rice Krispie squares are the greatest food ever invented. No one at Meridian was fond of Mr. Dahlstrom except Miss Duncan, who directed the Glee Club. She had a picture of Mr. Dahlstrom on her desk, which she sometimes stared at with soft, googly eyes. Every time Mr. Dahlstrom came over the PA system, she would furiously whack her baton on a music stand to quiet us. Then, after he'd said his piece, she would get all red-faced and sweaty and remind us of how lucky we were to be led through the treacherous wilderness of high school by such a manly and steadfast defender of public education. Mr. Dahlstrom is a bald, thin scarecrow of a man with a poochy stomach. Think of a pregnant Abraham Lincoln with no beard and a yellow toupee instead of a top hat, and you get the picture. He also looks like 100 years old at least. When I was in fifth grade, our teacher told us that the easiest way to remember the difference between principal, an underlying law or ethic, and principal, the chief administrator of a school, is that the principal is your pal. Believe me, Mr. Dahlstrom did not put the pal in principal. Okay, I'm going to pause again because I really like how the writer of this story is showing us how sarcastic and witty this main character is, Michael Vey. He has a lot of funny and sarcastic lines in here where he talks about how lucky they were to be led by such a steadfast and manly guy. And you can tell he's clearly being sarcastic, and his metaphor of high school being like an armpit and the principal's the stinkiest part of the armpit. So you can tell he's a really clever and kind of funny kid. I like that. All right, next page. It was the second time that month I'd been called to his office for something that someone else did to me. Mr. Dahlstrom was big on punishing the victim. I believe this is the second time you've been in my office this month, Mr. Dahlstrom said to me, his eyes half closed. Is that right, Mr. Vey? That was the other thing about Mr. Dahlstrom. He liked to ask questions that he already knew the answer to. I was never sure if I was supposed to answer him or not. I mean, he knew the answer and I knew the answer, so what was the point? Bottom line, it was the second time I'd been locked in my locker by Jack Vrains and his friends that month. This time they put me in upside down, and I nearly passed out before the custodian unlocked my locker and dragged me down to Mr. Dahlstrom's office. Jack Vrains was like 17 and still in ninth grade. He'd been held back so many times he had a driver's license, a car, a mustache, and a tattoo. He sometimes called himself Jackal, which is a pretty accurate description since both he and the animal prey on smaller mammals. Jack had biceps the size of ripe Florida oranges and wasn't afraid to use them. Actually, he loved to use them. He and his gang, Mitchell and Wade, watched Ultimate Fighting, and Jack took Brazilian jiu-jitsu lessons at a gym not far from the school. His dream in life was to fight in the octagon, where he could pound people and get paid for it. Is that right? Dahlstrom repeated, still staring at me. I ticked almost a dozen times, then said, but sir, it wasn't my fault. They shoved me inside my locker upside down. He wasn't looking very moved by my plight, so I continued, there were 3 of them, and they're a lot bigger than me. A lot bigger. My hope for sympathy was met by Mr. Dahlstrom's infamous stare o' death. Really? You'd have to see it to understand. Last quarter, when we were studying Greek mythology and we got the part about Medusa, or Gorgon woman who could turn people to stone by looking into their eyes, I figured out where Mr. Dahlstrom had come from. Maybe it had something to do with my Tourette's, but I blurted out, that must be Mr. Dahlstrom's great-great-great-great-great-grandmother. Everyone had laughed. Everyone except Mr. Dahlstrom, who had picked that precise moment to slip into our class. I spent a week in after-school detention, which wasn't all that bad because at least I was safe from Jack and his posse, who somehow never got sent to detention no matter how many kids they stuffed into the lunchroom garbage cans or locked in their lockers. Anyway, that had officially put me on Mr. Dahlstrom's troublemaker list. Mr. Vey, you cannot be stuffed into a locker without your consent, Mr. Dahlstrom said, which may be the dumbest thing ever said in a school. You should have resisted. That's like blaming someone who was struck by lightning for getting in the way. But I tried, sir. Obviously not hard enough. He took out a pen. Who are these boys who allegedly stuffed you into the locker? Mr. Dahlstrom cocked his head to one side, his pen wagging impatiently in front of him. I stared at the pen and its hypnotic trajectory. I'm waiting, Mr. Vey. Their names. There was no way I was going to tell him. First, he already knew who had done it. Everyone knew Jack had put more kids than textbooks into lockers. Second, ratting out Jack was the shortest route to death. I just looked at Mr. Dahlstrom, my eyes blinking like crazy. Stop twitching and answer my question. I can't tell you, I finally said. Can't or won't? Pick one, I thought. I forgot who did it. Mr. Dahlstrom continued staring at me through those half-closed eyes of his. Did you now? He stopped wagging his pen and set it on the desk. I'm sorry to hear that, Mr. Vey. Now you'll have to take their punishment as well, 4 weeks in after-school detention. I believe you know where detention is held. Yes, sir, it's in the lunchroom. Good. Then you'll have no trouble finding your way there. Like I said, Mr. Dahlstrom excelled at punishing the victim. All right, so we're going to stop there for today. I am actually really enjoying the story. I think it's really well written. So go ahead and complete the attached assignment, and it is due by the end of the day on Monday. Have a great day, guys.